Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Data Umbrella's webinar. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then we'll head on to our panel discussion, and then we'll have question and answer session. But you can always leave your questions in the question and answer tab or in the chat as the panel goes by, and our speakers will get right to them. A little bit about Data Umbrella. We are a community for underrepresented persons in data science, and we're a nonprofit organization. About the Data Umbrella team, we have Reshma here, who's a statistician and data scientist, and you can find her on Twitter, LinkedIn, and GitHub as Reshma S. And I'm Beryl Kanali. I'm a data scientist, and you can find me on Twitter as Beryl Kanali. We have a code of conduct, and we're dedicated to providing a harassment-free experience for everyone. And we thank you for helping make this a welcoming and friendly community for all. You can support us in various ways. So one of the ways you can support us is by following our code of conduct, so that we have people coming back to listen to our talks. And also you can ask and answer questions, and we'll also have a feedback form, which I'll share there, where you can leave your suggestions or feedback during the talk or after the talk. You can also support us by donating to a nonprofit. We are on Open Collective as Data Umbrella, and then we are on Benevity, which is a company matched platform. For example, if you donate $50, your company matches the same. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is a Data Umbrella, where we post all the videos to our events, ranging on different topics that we normally have. We have different libraries on our YouTube channel, so you can find playlists like career advice, data visualization, data science for beginners, open source, PyMC, NumPy, and scikit-learn. You can also sign up for a newsletter, which goes out monthly, and it's on Substack, and we only send one email per month with the newsletter with all the announcements, upcoming events, and videos to the previous events. We also have our website, dataumbrella.org, where we have resources on different things to do with data science, AI, career, and conferences and jobs as well. You can follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. You can join our Meetup group, where we post all our events. We usually have at least 2 events per month. And then you can also look at our GitHub, where we have awesome open source stuff that you can work on. This webinar has live captioning. If you look at the menu at the top of your screen, on your right, you'll find a CC menu. You can use that if you need to use the captions during the webinar. We also have a call for volunteers. If you are new to open source especially, or if you want to contribute to the event transcripts for the video when it's posted, we have repository on GitHub where you can do that, and you can do partial timestamps or full timestamps depending on availability. We have a feedback form, which is in the resources area. In this feedback form, you can leave feedback of this event, any technical issues that you might have, suggestions to future event topics, general feedback, and any other question or information you would like to know from us. We have an upcoming event on February 28th for statisticians who are really interested in R and Bayesian statistics. That will be a good event for you. You can also sign up to a Meetup where we post all the events there, and you can RSVP there. To today's talk. So today's talk will be on the Google Summer of Code experience, where we have a panel discussion with 3 former interns who have gone through the Google Summer of Code, who will be sharing their experience and who will be answering all your questions related to Google Summer of Code and open source if you have any. To introduce our speakers, I'll start with Patel, who's a maintainer of SciPy and a contributor to a few other open source projects like NumPy, PyMC, and scikit-learn. He participated in the GSoC with PyMC in 2020 and SciPy in 2021. He works primarily with Python and C, and he also codes with C++ and Julia. He's currently a graduate computer science student at Arizona State University. You can find him on GitHub and LinkedIn, and we will share the slides, the resources, in case you need to access these links. Our next speaker is Larry. Larry Dong is a PhD student in biostatistics at the Dalalana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto in Canada. His academic interests revolve around dynamic treatment regimes and Bayesian methods. He began his PhD during the pandemic, which allowed him to be immersed in open source, particularly in the PyMC community. His first GSoC project was with PyMC, and he returned in GSoC to continue this project and to learn about Sarah and Apple. You can find the links to his website and GitHub, and you can follow him there. Our last speaker is Oriol. Oriol is not a new speaker here. He has done several talks for us as well. He has a background in engineering physics and astrophysics and currently works as a computational statistician. He's a co-contributor and council member of ArviZ and PyMC projects. He also worked on statistical research while at Helsinki University and University of Pompeu in Barcelona, especially in the fields of inference diagnostic, prior elicitation, and data visualization. He dictates his times a lot to community management and documentation because he believes they're as important as the code. He has helped organize and mentored in multiple data umbrella sprints. He has also mentored many new ArviZ and PyMC team members whose background range from computational science to technical writing. There are the links to his social media sites. You can also access them in the slides. And with that, we can get started with the panel discussion. I'll now hand over to Reshma, who will facilitate that.
Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm first going to begin with, I presume everybody here knows what it is, but just for the sake of documentation, what exactly is GSoC Google Summer of Code? GSoC, I'm taking this from their website, is Google Summer of Code is a global online program focused on bringing new contributors into open source software development. GSoC contributors work with an open source organization on a 12+ week programming project under the guidance of mentors. So first, we're going to begin with a brief introduction. So we're going to go around and I'm going to ask each of our panelists their name, to repeat their name again, their GSoC project, the year they were in the GSoC project, and their mentor's name. So we will begin with Larry.
Oh, so hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Larry Dong. So I actually did GSoC twice recently. I did it once in summer 2021 and last summer 2022. The first one was looking into try to implement a Dirichlet process submodule for PyMC. It's still sort of work in progress. And that was with Austin Rushford and Chris Fonsbeck. And then most recently, I tried to look a bit more into the nuts and bolts of PyMC, which is NSR and APPL. And that was with Ricardo and Brandon Willard.
Thank you. Oriol, next.
Hello, my name is Oriol Abril. I participated in the Google Summer of Code with ArviZ on 2019 on a project that was about inference diagnostics and model comparison and things like that. I ended up kind of putting few smaller projects into a bigger one to fill the 3 months of the whole summer. And I worked with Osvaldo Martin and Ari Hartikainen.
Thank you. And Tirth?
Hello, everyone. I'm Tirth. I participated in Google Summer of Code in 2020 with PyMC. I think my mentors were Christopher von Esbach and Osvaldo Martin. My project was writing a higher-level Gaussian process API for PyMC 4. And most recently, in 2021, I participated in GSoC again with SciPy, and my mentors were Christopher Baumgarten and Nicholas McKibben. My project was to write a API for a C library called Uniran. So my project was to just write Python bindings in SciPy for the Uniran library used for sampling random variates from arbitrary distributions. So both my projects were very close, but yeah, those are the two GSoC projects that I did.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start off easy, is how did you first find out about GSoC? And we'll go back to Larry.
Oh, so I think it's a really fun answer to this. So actually, I found out through Oriol, and I didn't know Oriol at the time. So I was browsing Twitter mindlessly, or I forgot what I was doing, but I was browsing Twitter, and I was following Aki, who retweeted Oriol's tweet. And Oriol was like, yeah, if you want to do GSoC with us in the summer, you could. And then I heard about PyMC at that time. So I knew about the project, and I saw there was a really appealing project with Dirichlet processes. And so it was sort of a luck, and yeah, through Twitter.
Nice. How about you, Oriol?
I was actually browsing the ArviZ GitHub repo, and somehow ended up on the wiki page that listed GSoC project ideas. And I had no idea what GSoC was, and I was like, okay. Then I searched for GSoC, and I was like, I like these ideas and I like this initiative, so I will apply.
And you, Tirth?
Interestingly, in India, GSoC is a very big thing. I guess every college student wants to participate in GSoC once while they're graduating. So I heard it from my friends and and one of my faculty members. Once I heard, I was already contributing a little bit to open source, to scikit-learn a little bit. So I kind of knew what open source was, and I thought that this is a really great opportunity for me to work in open source more closely. And I was also taking a lot of courses on machine learning and statistical machine learning, and I had used PyMC before. So it was really cool to see that PyMC was participating too at that time. And yeah, so that's how I found out and participated with PyMC.
Thank you. So the next question is, we just went over how did you find out about GSoC? So maybe I should have asked this one first, is how did you find out about, like, how did you first get involved in open source? And I'll begin with Oriol for this question.
So I had done a couple very small contributions. I think pull requests to ArviZ, few issues, things like that, before finding out about Google Summer of Code. But I really started working on open source and making contributions and so on during the application period of Google Summer of Code, and then throughout Google Summer of Code especially was when I actually learned all the nuts and bolts of actually contributing.
Great. And how about you, Larry? How did you get started in open source?
So I started with GSoC, or rather, as I was applying to GSoC. So actually, before that, I just used GitHub to as like a storage for all my code, but I never thought about contributing to open source. So yeah, so it was all of a new experience all at once, but it was definitely rewarding. Yeah.
And Tirth?
I was taking a lot of courses on machine learning, and I knew about some projects like scikit-learn and PyMC that were open source. That was quite new for me. So I just signed up on GitHub. I started with small contributions to scikit-learn, just one-line contributions like a documentation change or simple bug fixes. That was very simple, and yeah, it was really a rewarding work. I thought that it's really cool project that are open source, and anyone can just contribute. That was a really great idea for me. I thought that was a great framework, and that's how I got into open source. It was a few months before I participated in GSoC. I think around October in 2019, I think I started, and then I participated in 2020. So yeah, that's how I got started with open source.
I want to repeat that that statement that you meant, like anybody can get started in open source. Anybody can get involved in an open source project, and that's the beauty of it. great. So the next question that I have is, how did you choose your project? And we'll go to Oriol and Larry for this one. We can start with Larry first. How did you choose your project?
So, there were many projects, and the one I chose was the first one was on Dirichlet processes, which is it's a non-parametric Bayesian method, and it's theoretically very challenging. And we had a summer course on it in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, and I thought, and it was sort of a coincidence too, because I thought that was very interesting, and I was starting my PhD in 1 month at that time, and I learned nothing from the summer course other than maybe an elevator pitch, and it was just a very challenging method. So, and fast forward to when I was browsing all the projects, I saw Dirichlet processes is not available in PyMC as a submodule. So, and I said, well, that's maybe a good opportunity to not just learn more about the theory, but also to try to implement it to make it a bit more accessible to people. It's still very hard, and it's still something that I'm still thinking about, but it was a nice springboard into open source, and it was just something I saw before. Yeah.
Oriol? Yeah.
So in my case, I had just finished my master in astrophysics, but I wanted to start working more on statistical things, especially Bayesian modeling, because I had used that a lot for my master thesis, and I used ArviZ and PyMC and so on. So I was looking at the repositories and resources and things like that. And that's how, looking through the ArviZ repo, I found out about GSoC and my project kind of at the same time. I was also very afraid of not getting accepted because I had no idea what GSoC was. So I did browse a little bit around the GSoC website for other similar organizations or projects or things like that, but I didn't really find anything that caught my eye. So I just applied only to ArviZ at the end.
Oriol, how did you prepare to apply?
I focused a lot on learning about ArviZ and how kind of things worked within the community, not so much on the more, let's say, technical aspects or the algorithms or things that I was planning to do during my project, because I kind of assigned a time window before the project started, because there's this community bonding phase before you have to start working. And I said, if I'm accepted, I will look into all of this. But for the proposal, I mostly try to understand how things fitted together so that I would know I have to do this task before that other one, and I can plan ahead. I need to be careful with the API to be coherent with the rest of the library. In ArviZ, docstrings and documentation are very important, so I made sure that the proposal took that into account and mentioned that everything would be documented and will have extensive docstrings and these kind of things.
So that's a really great point that you mentioned, which is you didn't look only at the code, you looked at what was around the code, which is the community and the conversations and all of that to better understand how it all worked.
I also extended a little bit the idea list from some open issues and things like that I found while browsing the repo. You are muted, Rashmi.
Yeah.
There I go. Forgot my own reminder. Sorry. The next question is, what are 3 things you have learned from your GSoC experience? And, you know, this is sort of related to this. How has it contributed to your professional growth? Tirth, do you want to go?
Yeah. So I think the first and foremost thing that I've learned from GSoC is communication. When I started initially, I was really bad at it. I was hardly able to communicate my ideas. I was hardly able to understand the multicultural communication that takes place on GitHub. And after working on my first GSoC project, I think I had a great idea about how communication happens, how you can propose an idea, how you can address reviews and other soft skills like that. I think it is one of the things that is really just ignored by most contributors. I think no one thinks about communication when they first start. They're mostly into coding and other exciting things. But yeah, I think the first thing that I learned is communication. The second thing that I learned is writing tests and documentation. Normally, when you write code, I don't usually write that many tests. GSoC, I mean, open source in general has this very good practice of testing your code and writing documentation for it. For me, during my college education, I don't think I would have ever used tests or documentation if I hadn't participated in GSoC. So that was one of the biggest things that I learned. And the third thing that I learned was working in teams. It can get tricky when you're working with your mentors. You'll have to ask for help. And I think initially when I got started, I was very shy. I didn't know how to ask for help and how can I ask my mentors for if I had any doubt. So once I had completed my GSoC, I had a good idea about how to do that. So yeah, I think those three are the biggest learnings that I got from my GSoC project and how it has contributed to my professional growth. It has really, well, it helps you get jobs. Recently, I got a lot of internship offers, and I think once you have a very good idea of how software engineering works, GSoC is something that could help you do that, and it could really shine on your resume. And you can, it's much easier to, I guess, crack interviews, convey your skills and your ideas about how to write good code to other people, your coworkers, or if you're looking for any job. So I think, yeah, professional growth, it has helped me a lot too.
I'm just going to repeat the question again. What are 3 things you have learned from your GSoC experience, and how has GSoC contributed to your professional growth? If Larry wants to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, back to Tirth, I think a lot of the things that were echoed, I would echo it as well. I didn't even know about tests as well, but there are 3 things. I actually wrote it down. I think the first one is a bit more like technical to my project, just statistics. So my project was on like a bit of on Dirichlet processes. So that of course came with its challenges from a theoretical standpoint, and then even just, I remember in the beginning it was very tough. I had to just start writing things in NumPy before jumping into the PyMC codebase. But of course, jumping into codebase was something that I learned. And the second thing I would say, another very big thing is just how to use Git. I didn't really know how to create a pull request, and just before creating a pull request, I have to know how to manage branches. So I didn't really know how to do that. And I think if you go through PyMC, the code base, I started with trying to correct a typo, and I have to create 3 pull requests to create that typo because it just, I don't know, it didn't work out for me for some reason. So I learned that. Hopefully that's better. But I think the third point that is very something that I really appreciated through all of this was how to ask for help. So that also echoes a bit what Tirth was saying. But not just asking for help from like the technical standpoint, because of course the code base was really challenging. I didn't know where to look or so having other people being receptive was very nice, and it's always okay to ask for help. But another very big thing is at least in PyMC, hopefully I'm speaking on behalf of other communities, there's a whole community. So there's a lot of people around, and these people often have jobs a bit maybe more senior than you. And I was very lost at the time with the pandemic and starting a new degree. So I asked a lot of like career advices. So just if you have any tips, just what's up, and how did you get involved in open source? How did it help you, and how did it shape your career? So I would say that was the biggest thing, and generally people were very receptive. Yeah.
And you, Oriol, what are 3 things that you learned from your GSoC experience, and how has it contributed to your professional growth?
So I'll also add to what both Larry and Tirth said. I didn't know about tests, barely knew anything about documentation and so on. I had also never worked collaboratively, which was a bit of a shock at first, but also very interesting and super rewarding. So I'd probably say collaboration for my first thing. I did also learn about several kind of paradigms for programming, more verbose, less verbose, more efficient, less efficient, all different trade-offs that you need to do. Even things like test-driven development or docs-driven development and things like that, where instead of starting with the coding, you start trying to write tests that you want to pass, and then you code something that passes those tests, or you try documenting what you want to happen, and then you try to match that, things like that. So I think the second thing I'd say is kind of like getting a new, wider view on programming, because I came from this very scientific-oriented formation. So we kind of coded as a means to an end to do simulations and inference and things like that. And it was just quickly code something to get out of this bind we are in, and then make a plot or publish something. And you can publish it in GitHub or whatever, but forget about this code. Never use it again. It's not important if it's clear, or if it's understandable, and then you would come back for a similar project to that same code 3 months later, and it was a complete nightmare because nothing ran, nothing was documented, you didn't know what was happening. So that was also something that I really took from GSoC. And the third thing is probably planning and coordinating. In my case, we had 2 projects that were quite independent because I was working on this model comparison and diagnostics and so on. But the other project was about trying to integrate the library with Numba to make it a bit faster. And so at some points, we were both working on the same part of the code base, because I was trying to kind of expand the features of that function or class or whatever. And the other intern was working on speeding that up. So we had to plan like, okay, so first we work here, then we work there, and coordinating was key for both projects to actually work together. And this has been even more important later on when continuing to work on the libraries, because each contributor is in a company or in a university and have their own plans or restrictions even. Like we need to publish that, or we need this model for a client or whatever. So it's also important to coordinate both interests and availabilities and things like that. As for development, personal growth and professional growth, GSoC has also been key. As I said, all the collaborative environment and so on really clicked with me. So I have tried to include open source in every single job I've had after GSoC, and so far have managed to do that. And in that sense, GSoC was not always key for me to get that job, but it was important in some of them. For example, it helped me get my PhD, and it was also key for this kind of realization of trying to get open source. And I am now currently working as open source maintainer as my main income source, which is amazing. And I wouldn't have expected that to be possible 3 years ago.
Great. I think what struck me by your comments that you said that that you took what you learned in GSoC to your own like coding and development, and it really contributed to that as well. And that it wasn't like, you know, open source really like became a very important part of your professional work. So great. Okay, so the next question that we have is, you know, what happens after GSoC?
Should we try and answer the questions in the chat first before moving?
Sure, we can do that. Let's go to the first one. The first one is from Rio, which is, hi, thank you so much for the informative discussion. I'm a beginner and started learning data analytics in R and Python just some months ago. Would GSoC be a good place to start, or could it be too challenging for people like me? Who wants to take that one?
I can go. So there is a whole lot of options available in GSoC. So you will definitely need to program, but if you have already started and you can already make some programs, and especially you are interested in learning, then definitely that's something that is feasible. Because as I said, you can do programs on a super wide range of things, like from super specific and deep statistical thing to some wide refactoring related to computer science, even if it's on a specialized library, to like endless possibilities. You just have to find a project that matches your profile and your interests.
And it's fair to say that different organizations and there's a whole range of projects that participate in GSoC, I imagine. Is that right? Okay. The next question is from Daniel. I would be curious to hear about the process by which Larry and Tirth prepared their applications. So Larry, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, oh gosh, how did I start? So maybe the first, so when I played for the second time, I was much more familiar with the code base. I took a project that was a bit more challenging. So at that time, I knew things a bit better. The first, so the first time I think was when things were really daunting, because I have not really contributed to open source at that time. So when I remember when I first saw the tweet, it was declare interest, I think on our Discord. So declare interest to the mentors, start writing to them. So I'd say the first step is just let them know that you're interested. And I remember, and from then on, it was just to try to dive into the code base, but really dive in from the shallow end. So like I shared previously, I started with just trying to contribute on correcting a typo, and that was already very challenging for me. So I think, so I went past that. Then I went a bit more into the project specific. So then I started talking about the Dirichlet processes and what they involve, and what I would anticipate the timeline of the project to be. I did not adhere to that timeline, which is okay. That's I guess part of the learning as well. But I guess the idea was sort of there. But communication with my previous mentors, then prospective mentors, and just trying to take a few steps at a time, because I would say the project that I took on was quite ambitious, and it's okay to not feel fully ready when you're applying, because at the end of the day, that's what the mentors are there to help with the progress as throughout GSoC.
Tirth, curious about how you prepared your application.
Yeah, so as Larry said, in 2021, when I participated in GSoC again, I had a very good idea of the code base and the processes, but the first time was pretty daunting. I think I started with a couple of project choices that I wanted to work on. Unfortunately, one of the projects they wanted to participate in did not get selected for GSoC. So I selected PyMC, which was, in PyMC, I had worked on Gaussian processes before. So I had a pretty good idea of Gaussian processes because I had taken this course called Bayesian Methods for Machine Learning in my college. So I think that was something that I knew that I had a solid base for. So I just looked at the projects page that PyMC had, looked that there is a project that is that says working on or writing API for Gaussian processes. That's how I chose my project. when it comes to writing the proposal, I started contributing to PyMC a few months before my GSoC. So it was around January or February that I started contributing. I started with a small bug fix. If I remember it correctly, it was just adding a new distribution. To do that, I just checked the other parts of the code base, so how other distributions were written, and then I just implemented a new distributions according to that. So it was a pretty simple PR, I would say. Also, at that time, I did not know how to write tests and stuff, so I learned along with that PR that I have to write tests and I have to write the documentation for this method. So yeah, that's how I got started with PyMC. Once I got started, I started writing a prototype for my project. So my project was writing a higher level Gaussian process API. So I started designing the methods that would be in the API that I designed. For example, if I write a class for Gaussian processes, it would have a prior method, a posterior method, and other methods that the users could call and get different things. So I think that was the first part of my proposal. It was writing a prototype. I submitted a small kind of medium-sized PR that implemented the API. It was a very, very simple draft, which was worked on, iterated on a lot during my GSoC project. But yeah, I wrote a prototype. I used that prototype to write the challenges that I thought I would face during writing during the GSoC project. And when it comes to timeline, again, as Larry said, I did not adhere to timeline. I just wrote what I thought would be the tasks involved. But when actual GSoC project came into action, things changed quite significantly. I faced challenges that I did not expect. There were different challenges that I had no idea how to solve, and I had to talk to my mentors to do that. So yeah, that's how I started with PyMC, and I wrote my proposal for it. Also, one more thing that I would like to mention. I noticed after participating in GSoC twice that it is much better to write one high quality proposal than trying to write multiple proposals. If I had not focused on PyMC that much, I think it would have affected my chances of getting into it. So I would really suggest working on just one project, just taking a project that you think is a really good fit for you, and then trying to understand the code base and starting a few months early if you are really ambitious. And yeah, I think that's all that you can do. And yeah, I think you can get your proposals accepted if you follow that. I think yeah, that's all.
Tirth, would it be fair to say that you started working on the GSoC project before you applied for the GSoC project?
A little bit, I would say. I did not actually work on it. I just wrote a very simple draft. I think you can check it out on GitHub right now. GitHub, I think. But yeah, it was a very simple draft. But yeah, I did think about the API design. That's all. Yeah.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Rio, which is, could you speak a little bit more on the process of making a proposal? Did you have a chance to speak to employees of mentor organizations? Who wants to take that one?
I think we have covered that a little bit in the process of making the proposal, especially not so much about the speaking with organizations. The first thing I would like to say is that in the vast majority of the cases, they will not be employees of mentor organizations, but volunteers who are contribute through their volunteer time to the repositories, or kind of as a side job. If they are at the university while they publish, they also contribute to the library and things like that, but they aren't really paid to contribute. Well, keep that in mind, because we may take a few days to answer or something like that, now that I am like kind of on the side of the mentors, and we try to do the best we can, but it's often challenging to answer everything and review everything before GSoC happens. This is something that changes a lot between each organization. In ArviZ and PyMC, which are the ones that I know, we have an option to communicate with us, and we use Gitter for ArviZ and Discourse for PyMC. And this is the part that changes a lot, but every Google Summer of Code idea list needs a way for you to contact the organization. So otherwise they would not have gotten accepted as organizations into GSoC. So just check for that either at the top or at the bottom of the list of ideas, and you will find a way to contact.
So Oriol, would you say that if you contact the organization, it's usually a question about a specific PR that you're working on, or like a contribution or a general question?
No, in general, we recommend people to reach out and say, I am interested in working on that project. And if they have a draft proposal, they can also share the draft proposal. We might get reviews before the application period ends, which can be helpful. But again, this is tied to us having enough time available on our hands to review the proposals before the actual official review we have to do once the application date closes. But yeah, you can also reach out if you're trying to make a pull request to get familiar with the code base and with the process and so on about specific questions. But if you want to just reach out and ask for references or say, hey, I have started with this proposal, but I'm a bit unsure about this part or this other part or whatever you are feeling.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, did you want to go, Larry, as well?
Oh, just to echo very quickly. Yeah, I also forgot about that. Yeah, people, I think most of the time they're doing some of this work pro bono, but there's no harm in sharing your proposal with your prospective mentors. I did, and I received some good feedback, and I think that played a very big role in the application process, because otherwise maybe, I don't know, I remember the feeling I was having as, oh, am I completely like in the dark? Is this even remotely close to what is needed? And well, so at least having this opportunity was nice. So I hope I can speak on behalf of other mentors as well.
It's great that with PyMC and ArviZ that you can like get that feedback on the proposal. It's pretty, yeah, it's super helpful. The next question that I see is, hi, Larry, how did you manage contributing to GSoC with graduate school? How did you balance that?
Oof, okay. So I think that the answer will depend. Okay, so there's a lot. I think there's a lot behind that, but also there's another layer with the pandemic. So the first summer was I was really tired of school, to be honest, because I started school in the pandemic, so I didn't get the interaction I had with peers and just normal schooling. So that, as I think in the introduction, I said it. So I wanted to find some sort of community, but also like revolving around some technical aspects. So I jumped into open source. And at that time, the summer I think it depends also on the program. So in my PhD, the first summer I had to write a theoretical exam. So I was juggling that. How did I juggle it? I think on my side, the pandemic was just very difficult. And I remember I was telling myself, if I do very well on this theoretical exam and I learn all the theory and whatnot, it would not be very motivating. I needed something different, just something, even if it would like add on to the studying I had to do, which ultimately I had to cut a little bit to contribute as well. So yeah, it was mainly, I think, for the first summer, just motivation and a little bit of boredom as well. But it also did help that the theory exam was a very like statistically heavy exam, and the project was also not too far from that, with the Dirichlet process also being involved. So that not really connection, but it wasn't too far off. It wasn't too disjoint from what I had to do that summer. And then after GSoC, I stuck around, tried to contribute to pull requests and issues, and when I got too tired of schoolwork, often, that was throughout the year, I would try to code a little bit, and it complemented well the theory that I was trying to learn. So I got sort of the hang into it for the next summer. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the long story short is it was a lot of interest and a lot of motivation, and really the people I was working with were very receptive, and it was a very, very pleasant experience. So that also helped.
Thank you. And it seems like the pandemic as well was somehow related to a positive outcome of the pandemic situation.
Yes, it really was. I think that I shared a lot of people. I jumped into open source, which is a really nice thing from the pandemic.
Yes, nice, healthy way to deal with the pandemic. The next question is, what kind of projects have you participated in? Are they provided on GSoC, or as a person you come up with them? And whoever wants to speak, go ahead.
I can take it. Maybe other people can chip in. So they were provided by the communities. So I think we mentioned this before. So right now we're sort of in a period of brainstorming ideas. So mine was provided by the community. I think for the most part, we will have a list and potential mentors. But I believe that if you do want to come up with your own idea, I do believe it's possible. So I would bounce that back to Oriol, and people are shaking their head. I see it's fine. But I think for newcomers, I think having that list would help a lot. So yeah, so the communities do provide a lot of projects.
Yeah, so basically, every organization that wants to participate to Google Summer of Code needs to provide an idea list. And those idea lists generally have kind of like a title for the project, 1-2 paragraph description, nothing else. And then in recent years, we also try to include the potential mentors and a bit of difficulty kind of sorting for the different proposals, and a bit of knowledge we expect to be required for that project to work. But for your proposal, you need to really flesh that out into an actual proposal that is feasible, which is generally 2 pages, something like that, 1-2 pages, unless it's something very technical, in which case you might need to include math, and that also always makes things significantly longer. And yeah, it is also possible for you to present a proposal with your own idea that was in the idea list. But if you do that, you should definitely contact the organization beforehand, saying, I am planning on presenting this proposal, which is not on the idea list, and make sure that they are okay with that. Because, as I said, in many cases, the mentors are also volunteers or have other constraints and things like that. So they might not be able to mentor you on something they don't know about, or something that doesn't match the goals they have from the employer or something like that. So never submit a proposal on something that's not on the idea list without checking first with the organization.
Thank you for that. So for people that are in the audience, if you have any more questions, now is the time. We still have another 10, 15 minutes left. So, put your questions there. And while we're waiting for people to ask any more questions, I would like to ask Oriol a question, because Oriol is someone who was a GSoC student, and as well, you have mentored as well, right? And so what is your experience being on both sides of it, and things that you sort of learned from the mentor perspective that you can share with people?
So, for example, when I was an applicant and I was writing my proposal, I was super stressed about my proposal, especially about the timeline part of the proposal, which is a requirement from Google that all proposals need to have. And I was like, I have no idea how much this will take. I have never written any test. How am I supposed to know about a feature that doesn't yet exist? How long will it take me to write the test and the documentation for this? So that was something that was kind of nagging me constantly when I was writing the proposal, like, this is not right, you need to fix this. And I ended up overdoing it a little bit. But from a mentor perspective, when I review proposals, I think it's very important to have a timeline. Even though we generally ignore the actual times that are written down, we take a look to make sure they are not completely out of place. But the most important thing when reviewing a timeline is checking that everything is in a coherent order and that you are not putting documentation before the feature or things like that that show you have not a feasible way to actually go on doing this work. And yeah, other than that, I think that I have, it has also helped me in reviewing how to have the participant kind of point of view, because I can see, like, okay, so this might be something that is not clear. This is something that could go this way or that other way, and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely quite different trying to write the proposal and then reviewing other proposals and things like that.
So I'm just going to summarize it. I mean, I guess the timelines are asked because it's, they're relevant, and it also forces people to think about the steps involved. And I think that gives an idea to the organization and the prospective mentor that the person has thought it through and, understands it. And if you're not like absolutely sure of this timeline, it's okay. Don't stress about it. But there is some benefit to writing out a timeline, even if there is some diversion from it. I guess it's like confidence intervals, right?
Yeah. In my case, for example, I had to write some functions for model comparison and then the plots for those model comparison functions. So if I was writing the timeline, I couldn't put the plots before the actual model comparison functions. You also need to make sure that the timeline has some windows, even if they are not the right width or the right time for tests and for documentation and all these kind of things. Otherwise, you probably will not get accepted, even if the times that are written there are actually the times that you will do.
That's a great point and a great tip. I know, like, even myself, I've often gotten, if somebody asks for specific timelines or even specific like budget, and I'm like, I don't know. So you make the best estimate, ask, add some kind of like interval, and adjust it as time goes on, because that's how things go. Okay, so the next question is from Han, which is, hi, I would like to know if GSoC is for solo or team. If it's open for a team, would you recommend to work in a team? Thank you.
I can take it if nobody else wants to go. So GSoC projects are only individual, and there cannot be projects that depend one on another. So when we are writing idea list, there can be things that are linked together because it's the same project. Like I mentioned before, we need to coordinate because some might be modifying the same part of the code base. But each of the ideas and each of the projects needs to be able to be a success on its own, because one student might fail and the other or might not be able to continue working. So all the projects are individual and it's not open for teams.
Okay, so, we have another, say, 6 minutes before the top of the hour. So now's the time. Hey, anybody in the audience, if you have any questions, please ask here. In the meantime, I have a question as well, which is, what are some challenges you faced during GSoC? And, how did you sort of approach it and solve it? Sort of like, how was it different from your expectation?
Maybe I can start. I think the biggest one on my mind, so I would say, first of all, the communication with my mentors was great. So I could see that potentially communication could always go either way, but that was great. That was amazing. I would say, I think really the timeline was probably and there's a little bit, I had also a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I remember Austin was the one who said this to me very, very clearly, no skipping steps. I think more concretely, I had to try to know how to do a pull request. I needed to know how to, what was the statistical method that I was dealing with, and just what were PyMC building blocks, PyMC distributions. And this was all before I actually jumped into the project. And I remember I was like, oh, I'm behind on my timeline. This is not looking good. I'm already 2 weeks or whatever. I had to go through all these steps beforehand, whether it was taking more time or not. They weren't. I also hope that they weren't upset at me, which I think most people are generally, very receptive. But I think that was the main challenge. I thought I wasn't making progress fast enough, and I guess in some sense it's normal. It's normal, and it's not easy. So, but I got past it. So it just took time. Yeah.
So I also know, if I'm correct, you read a blog during GSoC, is that right? And so I imagine, have you shared this in your blog as well? So. Yeah.
Actually, I think I wrote one really nicely, and I deleted it halfway. But everyone has to write blog posts. So I think you can find all of our blog posts somewhere on some of our websites. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's actually a great way to learn about other people's experience as well during GSoC. And so I'll state the question again in case anybody else would like to answer, which is what's a challenge or more challenges that you faced during GSoC, or something was different from your expectations?
I think I can go next. I think one of the challenges, as Larry mentioned, for my first GSoC project was communication. As he said, I was constantly questioning myself if I'm making progress fast, if I'm doing things right, and if it is happening as expected. But I think it just takes time and some practice to come over those problems, come over those challenges. After working more, after contributing a bit more, after making a few more pull requests, I think my confidence became better and better every time. I just was able to learn how to communicate better and how to evaluate whether something has been done correctly. And as the project evolved, as time passed during my GSoC, I think I learned that. And during my second GSoC project, I think I faced more technical difficulties. I hadn't worked with Python and Python C API, and I had to write and I had to integrate a C library in Python. So I think it was more technical. The whole project was much bigger and much more technically difficult than the one that I worked in last year. So I think the second project I worked on, the major challenges that I faced was just learning about the tools that I was going to use. And I would like to say that one thing that really helps is just going through documentation for the tools that you're going to use. I was going to use Python C API and Python, and just following the tutorials that were in the documentation was super helpful. It helped me learn the intricacies of Python and how Python C API works. And I think it's a great idea in general too. If you're going to work on any project and if you're going to use something, it's a really great idea to just check out their documentation and then try to go through their quick start guide or tutorials or examples that they have provided. This will really help you understand the tools that are going to use. And another biggest problem that I faced was just understanding the code base. Understanding the code base is never easy. I would recommend using a good IDE. So if you have a great IDE and if you're able to locate the functions and the dependency of that functions on other functions or a class on other classes, it really helps you navigate the code base much faster and helps you from getting overwhelmed from the size of the code base. Sometimes there would be like 10,000 lines of code, but it would just be individual functions, and every function would have been implemented by itself differently. So it is kind of easy if you look at it that way, if you look at it as a collection of functions rather than just the lines of code that are in the code base. So yeah, I think those were the biggest challenges that I faced during my GSoC. And yeah, anything you want to add, Oriol?
I definitely second the navigating the codebase challenge. And in my case, my project also was technical, but not so much in the programming sense, more in the kind of mathematical and statistical sense. So I had to read several papers and then implement those algorithms. And those papers were quite new, so the mentors hadn't read those papers yet. So it was also a bit challenging because I was kind of working full-time on GSoC, and I was able to read the papers in one day and then start working, but my mentors were not able to do that. So I had to kind of plan how I'd work on things and kind of work in parallel in 2 or 3 somewhat independent functions or classes or sub-projects, because I would do something and then I'd have to wait several days before being able to get feedback on that, because I'd have to wait for mentors to review both the code and the paper that was based on.
I think that's a terrific point about navigating the code base as a challenge and sort of spending some time exploring the data. It really is a matter of clicking and looking at it and seeing where it's connected. And I don't have experience as a GSoC, but I do have experience getting involved in open source. And I think it was a huge hurdle to cross just to go to the scikit-learn code base and click on the files and look and see what's going on. Like, that's available to everybody, which is like really, really one of the amazing things about open source. So it's also great that, like, you have gone from navigating the code base as a challenge to contributing, significantly as a project to the code base. So that's like a huge, huge journey that you have all done. So that's great. Very impressive.
You're muted, Reshma.
Oh, sorry. I see that there are no more questions. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this panel and share your experience. If you have any closing words, if you have any last minute inspiration for all the people that are interested in GSoC, feel free to share it now.
I'd probably say, so that it kind of is left as a takeaway, that if you are interested in GSoC open source and any of the projects you find, do not hesitate to apply and reach out to the organizations, because we as organizations want to have people working with us on GSoC and hopefully staying or continuing next year on another GSoC project and things like that. So we will try our best to help you get started and participate.
Any closing remarks for Larry and Tirth?
Yeah, maybe I'll echo what Oriol just said. I think, yeah, for me, one of the hard things was having the confidence. So if you want to, I'm sure you can, but obviously, I think it may not be easy, but don't hesitate to reach out. And I would say my experience, people were very receptive. So yeah, just don't be shy. Don't be shy.
And Tirth, just to share, I met Tirth in person at a conference, and he was like really, really, really excited and happy for his experience and how it contributed to his professional growth. And that has actually been the inspiration for this panel discussion. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think for my closing remarks, I just wish good luck to everyone. I really hope to see you in open source. And I would just like to point out one little point. I think GSoC and every other program like GSoC is about contributing to open source. So I would really encourage you to just go through open source projects, and even if you are not selected, or if you can just apply next year, or you can just start continue contributing to open source. It is, I think, one of the pivotal skills to make yourself a better developer, to learn new skills. I worked with other closed source projects, and most of the case open source projects always have better documentation and testing. So I am pretty sure that it will give you a really good idea about how software development works, and how you can gain some industry experience. So yeah, that's my point. Even after GSoC, I would really encourage you to continue to contribute to open source, any project that you have taken up, or any other project that you like to. But yeah, I think that's it.
Well, thank you all so much. Given the response with all the emojis, there's been a lot of love for this panel. So thank you all for taking the time. For those of you who are joining, this recording will be up in usually a day or so. And so thank you.